Today, we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Lucas Metropolis, CFRE and fundraising coach here at Bonterra. Lucas works with nonprofit organizations to enhance their growth, implement sustainable practices, and maximize their potential. He has consulted over 150 organizations, raising more than $200 million. As a professional fundraising coach, he advises small nonprofits on fundraising and marketing projects ranging from environmental justice, the arts, cultural enrichment, education, disaster relief, religious, political, and so many other cause areas. So we are in for a treat. Lucas has a wealth of knowledge here to share with us this afternoon. And so buckle in, grab your water, grab your lunch, grab your snacks, and sit with us for the next hour or so. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it to you, Lucas.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I always love doing these webinars. But Ashley, thanks again for having me. I'm based in Miami, Florida, as Ashley said, kind of a widespread of different kinds of causes all over the US, the Caribbean, South America, internationally. So yeah, excited to talk to you today. I'm going to share my screen and get started. So obviously, it's very timely right now. Many of you are jumping straight in, or probably already in year-end fundraising mode. And so today we're going to speak a little bit to year-end, but also specifically on, but also specifically on year-end, and then also how do we turn those donors into further lifelong donors. So we're going to start kind of looking at some of the donor behavior, which I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with. And then we're also going to go into sort of how do we identify, how do we nurture folks that might be a little bit more engaged this year end or to make them more engaged. And then looking at how can we take this year end going into 2026, which again, you might have different fiscal years, but many donors are thinking calendar. How do we now start out in the new year and thinking about how can we engage these people? How can we maybe move them up from what they gave at year end? How can we get them to give again next year? Hopefully this wasn't just a one-time donor motivated by a peer to participate. And then maybe looking at, can we try to see if a certain subset could become recurring donors, maybe monthly donors that were perhaps a one-time gift at year end. I'm going to speak a bit about drip campaigns. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with them. I use it a lot in different ways, so we'll be speaking about that, both on the engagement side, but also on the solicitation side. And then a big one here that I'm noticing more and more is sometimes a bit of some donor fatigue. And how do we kind of mitigate that? How do we make our engagement thoughtful and not just bombard people with mass messaging to get them to participate and to hopefully retain them? Right. So let's keep going here. So obviously the opportunity, I mean, these are just typical stats. I just threw in a few numbers that I'm sure many of us know, but a huge portion of the annual giving for a nonprofit happens, in this fourth quarter, specifically November, especially December. And 10% of that total giving actually happens in the last 3 days of the year, which is pretty wild when we think about all the work that we do throughout the year. Many year-end donors tend to be first-time givers, and often that's because a lot of times we're spending the year trying to get people activated, trying to cultivate them to give, and then the year-end is sort of our excuse to actually get them to convert. So you see, obviously, an opportunity and also a risk because this is your first impression on the solicitation side, perhaps, for many of these people, and kind of how we treat that relationship. As I noted there, you're taking a transaction, but you want it to become a relationship. It's not just give us $100 right now and thanks so much, bye. We want it to be, give the gift. Now, immediately, how do we enter that period of stewardship? How do we begin recultivating or engaging in a deeper way to potentially move them along to a new gift or to retain them? And that's why, again, I say it's very much a launch pad. Oftentimes people think of winding down calendar year-end fundraising as, this is it, we're done. For me, it's just the beginning. Like for me, when I think about a fundraising year, I actually have year-end fundraising as kind of my starting point, because this is what is going to help seed the next year of potential fundraising and kind of relationship management and growth for us. Okay. So with year-end donors, I mean, it's funny, I actually just had a call not too long ago. Some of the tax laws. There's a lot of accountants right now motivating individuals to advance their donations this year because some of the tax laws will be shifting in 2026. And certainly I'm not going to give tax advice, but that's certainly an income bracket. And that is something that is one of the reasons that are in people's minds as they're thinking about end of the year. I personally don't believe it's the main one. I never did. For me, it's really that emotional connection, that why. There's so many different causes out there. There's so much wonderful work happening, so many crises as well. Why should I give to you? And so for me, with all these appeals and outreach that I'm doing now, it's often very much rooted in that emotional connection. It's not really rooted on like, did you know that there's a tax advantage to making a gift? For me, many people know that they're getting consulted by actual professionals in taxes, and so for me, it's all centered around that emotional connection. What are we doing with our organization? What have we done this year? What are we trying to do moving into the new year? That is a great connection or can build on people's affinity to give, to participate in supporting us. And then urgency. It's hard because there's some causes that are out there that just say like, how do we stress urgency, right? Like there was, hunger is a big need right now. How does an arts charity, sort of compete with that? And for me, it's never thinking of like, how do we compete? It's more so like when I think of donors, I think of kind of a portfolio of giving. And I think about, where do we fit in a donor's kind of combination of what they might do for year end. Now, there might be other causes that are higher, more priority. And maybe your cause does have a really urgent need right now. And I would say, how do you stress that in a meaningful way? But the downside of that is I've done, as you mentioned, a lot of crisis fundraising and disaster. And you have a lot of causes who raise a ton of money during disasters and then they completely drop. And then often freak out and they call me saying like, "Oh my goodness, we had a budget of 3 million, now we can only raise 400K because the disaster's over." And so for me, it's always also balancing your appeals so you don't just become always a crisis fundraiser where you can only raise money during crises. And so when there's not a crisis, all of a sudden a lot of your budgets go up and down, causes different shifts. So for me, it's thinking about the messaging, it's thinking about the emotional appeal, it's making asks that are centered around your organization, its impact overall. Maybe taking advantage of certain tax or urgent related matters, but coming back to that emotional connection. And then, like I said earlier, just trying to treat your year-end donors as even new relationships, even if they've given before. Like we also sometimes become complacent with the donors that we have, and we think about retention. We're like, well, they'll give no matter what. Like they give every year. And I've seen many cases where that doesn't happen, where all of a sudden an organization is surprising. How do we lose this $5,000 donation when they've been giving for 4 years straight? What happened? And a lot of times it's because we've deprioritized our retention and we've just said, well, we need new people. And we forget about the people we already have, which is much cheaper, much easier to retain than just to acquire. And so, again, I treat a lot of year-end donors as also new relationships, even if they're not. All right. And then also, I like to think about sort of their behaviors with year-end donors. How have they interacted with us, right? How recently have they given? How frequent? What is their level of engagement with us? Those all matter. Like sometimes I'll look and I'll work with an organization and they'll say, well, these are all the people who gave last year in November and December. I say, okay, well, show me everyone who gave in all of 2024. And everyone's like, well, why are we doing that? And often it's because I see a lot of people who could do a gift again. Like, for example, they made a gift in January of 24, and we took them off the list because we said, well, they already gave, right? Like they gave, why would we ask them again? Or even the beginning of 2025, you know? So I try to look at the whole picture, like who is on the table that has given before, starting with your lapsed people, but then also moving further back for folks that have given in other years. And then again, coming back to that impact stories, why do you deserve funding? A lot of the year-end funding that we push for is often, for me, it's saying we did all this work in 2025. We are doing good work and we need your support to go into 2026. So it's kind of like a validation of the work that you've been doing, but then also people's faith in you moving forward. And so that's why for my messaging, a lot of times it's not just like let's do a slideshow of all the things we did this year. But it is important to highlight some of those key pieces in line with your mission to say, we raised money last end of the year to help provide 15 scholarships. We did 16 scholarships because of people like you. Okay, donor sees that it's in line with your mission. You asked for it, you did it. Too often do you see these end of the year campaigns super vague and promising a lot of things, not really delivering on, or doing it, but not reporting on it, not letting people know the great work that was done with it. And donors just kind of lose, they don't become super motivated to keep supporting. And then also thinking about how do we thank people? A common thing I like to do, and many of you probably do it as well, but in January, sometimes I'll take the year-end donor list or even all of 2025, and I'll say to our board or volunteers or staff, I'll say, we are going to personally call, even if it's a voicemail, let's personally call everyone over this number or everybody if we can, and just say, I want to thank you so much for your end gift. We send the tax receipts via mail or email. But sometimes even the phone calls these days, I've had many cases of a board member calling someone, and I like to say, call someone you don't know. So I might give a board member saying, here, who do you not know on this list? Okay, call these two people, just two people, call these two people. And I've had board members do that and actually resulted in new gifts or increased giving from people. And the board members are like, wow, that wasn't scary. These are actually normal people we have. No way. Um, and so I like doing that sort of a stewardship exercise. And then also you have this new calendar year where it's an opportunity to think about. I like to kind of put these donors on sort of these journeys to think about, okay, how do we now interact with this person throughout the year? What events do we have? Do we have a physical space? Can we offer a tour? Are there ways for them to volunteer? Some way so it doesn't just go from one year end to the next year end with an email appeal. If there's a touch point opportunity in between or multiple, you might be able to move some people up in giving, or you might be able to leverage that person for a new connection that you didn't have before. But that's your time. It's a clean slate. You can really take time to engage people and potentially move them up in their support. All right. So similar to what I said before, thinking about how do we look at following up with people. I see so many times where we hit them hard for year end and then everyone goes on vacation and then they don't hear from us for like 3 months or maybe not till 9 months later. But it's really, really important that we follow up and we show that appreciation for people. Sometimes I'll do a little impact update. Honestly, I like to do it even quarterly. Some groups will do monthly. But I like to sometimes do a quarterly update, even if it's bullet points and using even something like ChatGPT to whip up something nicer. But some kind of update or message, sort of celebrating, where we're going and the progress being made. Everybody wants to support something moving forward, not just that's just staying still. And like I said before, thinking of that donor sort of journey map, what does that mean? What does it interact with? And it doesn't have to be just how do we thank people? It could then be saying, okay, what's the timing? When do we ask this person again? We've never asked this person for a spring gift. Maybe we're going to do a participation challenge. Maybe we'll just ask them to participate. Whereas year end, we might ask them for a $1,000 gift during the spring. Maybe we just ask them to donate, just give anything, to just be part of it, to be counted. And then also thinking about your messaging and how do you continue to really root it in value, the value that these donors are bringing, the impact they're making, and then also the impact and value that you're bringing to the table. It has to be sort of this partnership. That's what a lot of donors are looking for right now, especially younger donors. A lot of them are looking for being a partner, not just a donor. Like they want to be, and some might not come to every event. They might not need 100 emails, but they do like that feeling of feeling like they're involved in something or part of something. Okay. So thinking about one time, this is always a question I get. How do we get more recurring gifts? Sometimes you'll have opportunities to potentially, like I like to look at subsets of donors where their gifts are a little smaller, that if they did it monthly, it could be even larger. So for example, maybe a donor that gave you, $100, thinking of can we get that person to give $25 a month? Um, and so I usually take a smaller donor. I sometimes look at year-end donors and say, okay, who gave below definitely less than $1,000 or $600. Let's see if we did a recurring gift push to that group. And usually I don't leave it open-ended. A lot of times I'll see appeals that are like, join us as a recurring donor. It means a lot. We can do a lot with it. I sometimes like to actually make like a mini campaign, like for example, end of January. I like to think of donors often think of it like almost like a payment plan where they'll have 12 months to complete a donation for impact for this charity. And so sometimes I like to do, even up for a 1 week push, end of January, I might do, during this special week, we are trying to get 25 new recurring donors to join us throughout 2026 to have impact, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I find putting like a number of a goal, a participation goal you're trying to reach makes it easier to get people to act versus just open-ended become a recurring donor. And I've had an org I worked with before. We did this every year for 3 years. First year they had three. Then we did this campaign. They picked up 25. They have 28. Um, Second year they did again. Now we're at 55. Third year they did again. Now they're sitting at like 100 plus recurring donors. And that was like one of the best I've seen. But it was smaller. And a lot of their board were criticizing, saying, how do we only 25 people would give us like $10 a month? That's wild. Like there should be more. But for me, it's a gradual build. Unless you have a humongous listserv, unless you have a very captive audience, it's pretty challenging just to jump in recurring giving without doing it kind of this piecewise, this sort of long-term approach. And then also somebody's thinking, how do you frame it? Are you framing it around sort of a circle, some kind of recognition level, not just as like become a monthly donor? I find that more and more people want to be sort of part of something, like I was saying before, not just like I contribute monthly. That's just the timing. And then, of course, you have the impact piece. What could it actually do? Now, sometimes you read these when I see nonprofits post these, sometimes they're sort of general. The more unique you can make them, like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Like I worked with one charity that was working with goats and they were they would say like certain levels, like it was like $100 buys a goat for a family. It was like what? Like that was just such a random but so interestingly tied into their mission that people got really surprised by. Or I've seen it with Thanksgiving with turkeys. But people were able to kind of conceptualize it very easily. Like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Like the idea that this family's gonna have a goat that can then produce milk and cheese for this family for, years to come. That's kind of cool that I can do that with $25 a month. Um, and then also thinking of how do you recognize them potentially publicly? Now, some donors don't care for that. Many do. For me, it's more of like I did one where we did a special event. I'm not saying to have a lot of events, but we did a special gathering where we did sort of invite the recurring donor people. I forgot exactly the title we gave them, but it was a unique group that we kind of wanted to create some FOMO from the community of like these people are invited to this nice event every year because they do this type of gift. And it did motivate many people who wanted to come to that event to make that recurring donation. So, yeah, so thinking about how you recognize them, maybe it's an annual report, an impact report on your website, maybe a small event. But again, thinking of how do you kind of differentiate this sort of different group and how they're choosing to support you. Okay, this is one of my favorite topics, rooted around drip campaigns. And I'm sure many of you might know what they are. Just it's basically this kind of series, a series of email messages. Now it could be email, LinkedIn, etc., but it's just a series. So I like it. There's different software out there that do it. You can also do it just manually. The idea of sending kind of a sequence, not just a one-off. Sometimes we try to cram a ton of information into one appeal or one thank you. I like to piece it out. I find people's attention spans are quite short. And so, for example, even for year end here, I have hundreds of drip campaigns running where like the first appeal goes, then 3 days later, if they don't reply, a second appeal goes, but it's shorter, maybe a bit different. Same idea with some of these journeys of these donors that I keep mentioning, even for the new year. You could say to yourself, okay, these are our six core messages we want a new donor to get after year end. It's a thank you, then it's invite to volunteer, then it's a invite to participate in our spring push, then it's a chat with the executive director, then it's going to enter into our year end again, and we're going to do an appeal for them, a soft appeal to kick off Q4. Um, so that's really all it is. Like I said, there's a bunch of software out there. I use a good amount of them. But you can see my little stat at the bottom there. It heavily increases donor engagement. I'll tell you, open rates, I've never seen open or click rates higher than doing this technique. I mean, I'm having like 80%, 90% open rates on large, like 900 emails being sent, which is very rare. And click rates of 40 to 60% on links to give or links to learn more, impact report. So in terms of getting eyeballs to actually see the work you're doing and maybe to actually act on it, doing these kinds of sequential messaging is really, really, really helpful. So I definitely encourage you guys to look at that. And then just lastly, thinking through sort of the that piece on fatigue. I mentioned a ton of emails just now, but that's also why I mentioned that, as I said here, frequency isn't bad, but it can't be irrelevant. And so that's why I say these journeys, the sequencing is good as long as they make sense to what you're doing, right? It shouldn't be just the same email 5 times asking someone to give. It needs to be differentiated. It needs to maybe be a different angle. You can think about your messaging throughout the year, maybe mixing up who it's coming from, sort of the standard pieces there. And also, as I say, I usually do like a 3-to-1 rule. Some organizations like more, but for every 3 non-asks, you might have an ask. But if you notice there, it's not an ask every single time. And that's where you get a lot of burnout from a donor base or unsubscribes, ignoring, just desensitization of your base. Because there's okay, every time I hear from Elizabeth, it's an ask. And I still haven't heard, are the kids doing well in the program that I funded? Um, so again, mixing that gratitude, tying in the storytelling, being transparent. Now I have other orgs that are a little too transparent, and sometimes their year-end appeals look more like desperation messages of, either give or we will close, even if that's not the case. And I've seen that, work and then turn very bad, where people lose faith and they want transparency, but they also don't want to think they're putting money into something that might fail. So it's kind of a balance of how do we narrate perhaps our situations, making sure that we're being transparent, but at the same time telling the story of impact, which is what everyone cares about. And then being thankful for what we're getting, being thankful for the people that are stepping up, maybe to provide a match, or just to support in general. Um, and as I noted, just trying to make sure that we're making our donors feel seen, and not just always asked. There's plenty of asking going on. And it's funny to me too, because sometimes I'll work with clients who they feel like they have to educate every donor about philanthropy. And I have seen so much, especially the larger donors, their sophistication in the donor pool. Most people are used to being asked by a lot of nonprofits. So it's more so for me, again, telling that story, bringing them in with a hook, not so much telling them, like, did you know that you could leave us in your estate plans one day? Like things like that are known. They're not going to consult you for that. And so I say just stay true to, again, making sure they feel recognized, making sure they feel seen, making sure they see the impact you're doing, and again, involving them in the work that you're actually doing. So just lastly, as I said earlier, think of this year end as sort of that launch pad going into the new year. Try. Like I said, end of January, I like to do a little recurring giving conversion, see if we can get some people, even if they just gave for year end, kind of turning back and say, hey, thanks so much. But, would you consider this for 26? And then if you have never tried drip campaigns, even the thought of it, the process, I'd say look into it and consider it, even for year end here. And then again, just be true to your mission and try to engage as much as you can with the purpose of what you're doing, more than just pressuring people. But I say do be frequent, do be consistent, because otherwise you won't get seen. So yeah, those are just some quick thoughts.
Awesome. We can go ahead and leave that up for folks that might want to grab your information here, Lucas. But thank you so much. This was so great. Like I said, folks, we were in for a treat with a wealth of knowledge, which Lucas delivered. I really loved what you had to say about putting a goal with your recurring donors and letting them know, like, hey, this is how much we're trying to do. We're at this percent of our goal. I've heard that a lot. And I've heard more so that implementing those goals can really make a lot of difference for, like you said, for their donor base to feel a part of something and feel like they're helping you cross the finish line. So love what you had to say about that. I want to go ahead and get into Q&A because we've got a lot of good questions here.
Okay.
But before we go ahead and do that, folks on the line, I'm going to launch another quick poll here. If you are interested in looking at Bonterra's tools, or if you just need tools to help steward your donors as we look into 2026, maybe not this year, but starting off fresh in the new year, just want to go ahead and launch that quick poll here. Feel free to fill that out. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we can have one of our colleagues reach out to you to initiate those conversations. But I'm going to let folks fill that out as well as drop any other questions that they have while we have Lucas here on the line. But I want to go ahead and kind of get into our Q&A portion. The first question that I see here is, if we only have capacity for one stewardship effort after year end, what should it be? Where should they put their efforts?
One stewardship effort. I honestly would do calls. I know it seems old school, but I would do phone calls if you have phone numbers, and I would encourage you to always require phone numbers. But calls, maybe a follow-up text if they don't answer. But I'm telling you, I've just had so many positive results these days because I think people are going heavy on emails or letters. And I think the hearing the voice from someone, a human being of from the organization goes a long way. And I'd say if you can involve your board leadership, even better. And if you can go further down the list, like if it's not just your 10,000 plus donors who are used to being talked to, but try to go further down the list. Say, oh wow, we have some 250 donors. They could do more, probably many of them, but they don't. But we don't really engage with them. We don't really thank them. They get a tax letter. Um, let's see if a board member has a call. I mean, it really does impress people. Like, well, I gave $100 and a board member called me to say thank you. Like, that's wonderful. How can I be helpful? So yeah, I would focus on that.
Yeah. Good point and good call out. I think it definitely can make folks feel really appreciated receiving a call. And to that, there was another question that came into the chat, which I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. But what if people don't want to make calls? Like, what if they get pushback on calls? How do you get your development team, your board, the folks, your champions, how do you get them on board with calling? And I think people are they're scared to call.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the level of scared. Like I've had one case where the board was like, I don't want to do that. Or I don't have time to, or I'm nervous. And I've honestly actually had one-on-ones with those people and literally sat there or with them on a Zoom while they made the call. So some of them it was a timing issue. Like I just don't have time to do it. So I was like, okay, listen, like we're talking right now. Always stay on the line or put me on hold and could you make this call right now and then hop back on, let's talk about it. And that actually worked with a good group. Now there are some just who just absolutely weren't comfortable, and I've had some who I'm like, okay, if you're really really not comfortable, no problem, you don't have to. And I've taken the board members who were okay to it, or I've had some in the middle like, hey, I'll do it, but can you help give me a talking points or a script? Like I've had some who literally wanted a script. I'm like, okay, not as great, but sure. And I've had some who just I gave talking points to, and they were fine. But again, I think there's this feeling like what if I mess up? What if I misrepresent the charity? And that's why I really tell them like, listen, you're not just calling about the charity. I want you to talk like a normal human being. Like just introduce yourself, talk about your life, what you do. That's it. Like you can make the connection to the charity. They know what we do. Now we want to connect them to another person, especially someone in leadership, where they can be, wow, Bill's a really nice guy. I didn't know he's a lawyer at a firm that I actually used to work at. No way. Um, so you're more so building that human connection. It's not just about that board member being able to tout like, stats of the organization, things like that. That's not as important in here. It's more of that human connection, that human thank you. And for the donor to recognize that there's a really nice person who's in leadership, even above the staff that they usually interact with.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you were on the Zoom while they were on the call to kind of coach them. Yeah, sometimes folks need that little push. And a script. A script is something that I didn't even think about, but that's
Mhm.
genius. Yeah, folks
Yeah.
sometimes they stumble on their words or just feel a little nervous. So script is a great tip. Awesome. We had another question come in. Very interested to hear from you about this one. But how can we automate our donor communications, but without sounding impersonal? I feel like a lot of people have that fear of like balancing that act between wanting to make it as easy as efficient as it can be, but also keeping that kind of more human touch to it. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to
But
say.
not to look like robotic, right?
Exactly. Right. We don't want to look like robotic.
Yeah, so that's why like I'm not gonna like tout like I mean too many specific like software I use, but like one I use is called Mail Meteor. It's a plugin for Google. So I literally use Google Sheets of an organization, for example. I line up my prospects and I'll use merge fields. So I'd be like, dear, Elizabeth, or I might not even use dear because it's so formal. I mean, Elizabeth, you know, great to blah blah blah. We're doing XYZ. Then I might have another merge field in that spreadsheet. I'm writing a different thing for each person. So I
Mm,
line up everybody on the spreadsheet, and like that second merge field, I might have a sentence about that person. It's so personal. Like,
yeah.
hope your daughter Susan's doing great at Cornell. Next person, hope your dog Benji is healthy again. And so that merges into that same text. And so then everyone's like, oh,
Right.
wow, like this is hyper personalized. No way. I've done that, and I've had people, like, I've done that on behalf of development directors or on behalf of executive directors. And I'm telling you, they get responses back like, man, I can't believe you remembered my dog. Or sometimes I'll even include a mistake. Like I'll include a little mistake in there so it looks even more human. Um, so like there's a little comment like don't put the long dashes from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like there's little things like that where you can it looks less and less. I have not had people write me back, this looks robotic. Um,
Really?
because again, it's an extension of my email. I use
Right.
it as like an extension tool. And the reason I do it too, those programs, is also to beat the spam filters because
Mhm.
they stagger send. So I'm not sending 500 emails at once. I'm sending one email every 2 minutes
Right.
to do the 500. So all of a
Smart.
sudden Google and Outlook, if hopefully not on the call, but they're looking at it and they're looking at it and they're like, wow, okay, like this is just a normal person writing emails. This is not an automation. But at the same
Right.
time, I'm sitting there and the key is the follow-up. So like for these year-end drip campaigns I'm doing, we're doing like a one, two, three. And the first one goes, if nobody replies or no one gives, the second email goes. Then all of a sudden you see a
Mhm.
ton more action, a lot more clicking the link. Okay, fine, I'll make a gift. Sorry, I missed it. I've been traveling. Then they're taken off. Then the third tier goes, and now you're down to the last group. So like the second and the third message, you see a ton more opens and clicks and actual conversions. And if you look at it, had I just sent the first message, we might have gotten two gifts, but by the end of the three, I might pick up like 30 donations. Um, so that's again trying to definitely make it not look robotic, but I'm telling you the key to follow up, because otherwise what happens is we're manually doing it or we're sending it in a mass way through like a MailChimp or Constant Contact or Network for Good, et cetera. And if we just do that, often different services are recognizing them as potential solicitations and they're flagging them and
Mhm.
they're going more so to spam. So you might have a 20% delivery rate from your mass email, but your the drip email that's spread out over time, you might get a 70% open rate. So
Right.
yeah, and there's
Awesome. What was
some
the name?
tools have automation. What?
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask what was the name of the tool that you had mentioned that you
Man,
use
I
again?
need to get some money off this tool. No, it's called Mail Media. I put it in the chat. It's a good one.
Awesome.
I think it's out of France, but mailmedia.com. It's just a Google extension. And for Outlook, another one I've used is called like Quick Mail. That's pretty good. You can use Mail Media for Gmail too, and it's cheap. It's like 25 bucks a month.
Okay.
This is not some really expensive tool. But
Nice.
but again, it's
Awesome.
more of the idea of doing that sequential messaging, and yes, making it not robotic is key.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if it sounds robotic, there's no point to do it.
Right.
Like then it's just like send your mass emails because you're going to get the same kind of engagement.
Right. Pretty much. Yeah. Awesome. Wanted to make sure folks had that if they wanted to check out that tool. Awesome. Looks like we have another question. And folks, feel free to continue to drop them into the chat or the Q&A. But we have another question that, yeah, I think this is very relevant. They asked, how do we stay visible to donors without overwhelming them? I think especially when we come up to this time of year, folks feel as if they can be overwhelming their donor base. People are getting emails from left and right. So how do they stay visible? How do they stay top of mind for their donors? But yeah, without causing that overwhelm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's too late because it's not, but I will say for next year, doing more ground game September and October, even August, like that's
Yeah.
the missed opportunity. Is usually people it dies off in the summer even, and people are like, well, no one gives in the summer. Why would I do any cultivation? But I'll tell you, like earlier and earlier now, what I'm doing is I'm cultivating even over the summer months, even getting their excuses of I'm traveling, I can't talk. I'm nowhere, no worries. We'll connect when you're back in September. And then boom, I have a quick meeting with them right in September versus November, or getting kicked to the new year. And so I'll say like more engagement earlier before Q4, right at the edge of it, is what will set you up to not burn people out. Because like when I do that with an org, what happens is we have to send less mass communications here in November and December. Because what I'm doing is I'm locking in their gifts. So like I had conversations with people in October or September where I said, year end's coming. I know you're going to get our messages. In the past, you've given, you gave $5,000 last year. I'm trying to find a few people to give $10,000 year end to really help us catapult to the goal. Can we count on you for that? And
Mhm.
some people are, yeah, okay, write me down. I'm in for 10. I'll give it in November. Okay, great. So like I went up after our key people. So now the messaging that we're doing in November, December for many of my clients is hopefully going to be more centered around the lower donors or new donors. So we're kind of trying to, and then we're trying to sift them out of the data. We're trying to take out the big one, the ones who are always getting hammered by you. I'm kind of cooling them off and making sure they don't feel like they're being really, really pushed,
Yeah.
because we personalize that at the higher end.
Right.
But yeah, it's again, it's thinking through like how many mass emails do you send versus direct messaging. Do you have an event maybe that you can use to help, also drum up support? Um, Again, I'm a big advocate of using all the channels though, like social, mail, text, emails. I definitely advocate for, sending it out there. I don't advocate for sending like 25 emails at your end, even as people aren't giving or engaging. And I'm a big fan of once you get your year-end campaign going, can you segment at all? So like taking out, like I like to let, even if they've given this year, I like to let everyone know the year-end campaign is starting because you might get some double gifts, triple gifts. But then as I do my next comm, let's say right before, let's say like next week, um, I might take out those that I've given this year. And now it's only the lie bunts and the side bunts. Then, in December, again, taking out the ones who just gave recently. So I kind of whittle down the list so I don't feel like everyone's getting the same thing over and over and over. Because I don't want them to feel that way. And they're going, regardless, they're going to feel that way because everyone is pushing them to participate.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Sorry about that if I went
yeah, it's good.
offline for a second. But awesome. Here we have another question that came in, and folks, feel free to again drop those questions in. But Carolyn asked if we are recording today's session and if we are going to provide that recording, and I can answer that one. We are. We did record today's webinar, and we will be sending that out to your email, the email that you use to register next week. So be on the lookout for that. But it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through. I want to give folks just a couple more minutes, seconds here to do that. But while they do that, Lucas, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this webinar, sharing your expertise with us, working on this. It's been great collaborating with you. And thanks for dropping a wealth of knowledge onto folks this afternoon. And for folks here on the line, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, your attention this afternoon. Thank you for joining us, asking these great engaging questions. It always makes for a better webinar experience, in my opinion. We've got that good back and forth. So really appreciate you all joining and spending the last 40 minutes with us. We really appreciate it. But we'll give folks just a couple more seconds here if there are any other questions. But if not, please feel free to keep a lookout for that recording and join us at our next webinar. We are so excited for what we've got for the rest of the year. We're coming up on the last couple ones, surprisingly. I feel like this year has passed, but we definitely hope to see you at our next one. Be on the lookout for that. And we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.
All right.
Awesome.
Hey, no
Bye,
more, no more
everyone.
questions for me. I was ready for 100 questions. Come on.
I know, no, I don't think so. I think
All
folks,
right.
I always say that if there's not many questions, that just means you did a great job explaining.
I
So,
hope. I talked a little fast, guys, so hopefully you got some good nuggets of wisdom. But thank you for the
yes.
opportunity and good luck with your end.
Yes, good luck with everyone's year end. And we hope to see you at our next session. Bye, guys.